God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this conference. Thank you for the fellowship that we share through Jesus and for the work of CCHF. We thank you for Steve and Victoria and for the many, many people who laid the foundation for us today. And we pray, God, not only for restoration and healing and hope, but also for the future. And we look forward to what you're going to do through the folks in this room and the folks in this building in Jesus' name. So if you all don't know, I'm Wayne Detmer from Lawndale Christian Health Center. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer of Operations and a family doc, and I've been there for 26 years. And I'm really going to tell you a little bit of the story of our intern program. And the word program is a little bit of an overstatement, as some of our interns here are going to tell you. Everybody up here was an intern at Lawndale, either currently or in the past, except for Trent, who is representing Ethne, right? Which is just an amazing, you heard Esther this morning, an amazing organization. So the reason that I'm talking today is because oftentimes as the Chief Clinical Officer of Operations for a quarter century now, I've seen a lot of things and done a lot of things. And sometimes people will say, give me your top three bits of advice for us. Starting an intern program is at the top of that list, which might surprise you. But there's some reasons for that. One of them is because it's just me. It's my personality. I love working with interns. It's the way that I came into this, not through internship, but just understanding how powerful it is to be able to witness some of this work and how that transforms people's lives. And I literally could stand here for this entire hour and tell you story after story of people, not just interns, but people, some of them who came to Lawndale for a 1-hour tour. And they said it changed their life. And it's not because Lawndale's so great or anything. We're broken. Just disclaimer for all of you idealistic people. We sin badly at Lawndale. I don't have any cool slides like Rick. I'm a little intimidated. This brings it full circle, though, because one of the first times I was invited to speak at the Global Missions Conference, 2 years out of residency, I was all nervous. And afterwards, I walked out and they said, the current CEO of CCHF, his name was Jerry Strongberg, and he said, you know who was in your talk? I said, who? He said, Rick Donlin was in your talk. And I felt so honored. And here we are today. That's what I'm talking about. No. So I'm gonna stop and tell you and ask each of our panelists to tell you a little bit about themselves, where they went to college, what they're doing now, and what the future plans are. So we'll start with Jonathan. Grab that microphone.
Hi guys, I'm Jonathan. I went to college at Calvin University. What I'm doing now is I'm a clinical operations intern at Lawndale Christian Health Center. And it was what the plans are for the future. Yeah. And my plans are to apply to med school and hopefully to become a doctor.
Hey, my name's Trent Bartolome. I went to Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And yeah, I decided to work at Ethne Health in Clarkson, Georgia, a suburb outside of Atlanta, for my gap year intern. We do a lot of things as gap year interns there. And next year in July, I'll be starting in med school at an undecided med school, whichever one I don't know, multiple, I don't know.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen, and I graduated from Claremont McKenna College in May 2023. That's in Southern California, if someone doesn't know. I am also a clinical operations intern as Jonathan, and I started about a year and 4 months ago. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Also, my future plans is to start at grad school at Rush University in the Health Systems Management program starting in September, late August. And hopefully it's just going into like the behind the scenes of healthcare. So also, if you have any questions about that, let me know.
Hi, everybody. I'm Abby Ahn, and I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I actually ended up at Lawndale because Dr. Detmer spoke at a chapel at my small Christian school when I was a sophomore in high school, and I just, couldn't get over it. So I came and I did an internship program called Lawndale Summer Medical Project, which is a 1-month kind of internship immersion program. So if you have any questions about that, please ask me. I love it. Can't speak more highly of it. And then I stayed on with Dr. Detmer and interned for him, like in the same role as these guys, for 6 months during my gap year. I'm currently at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine in my first year, and I'm a National Health Service, part of the National Health Service Corps program. So I will be serving in a medically underserved community after I finish my training. But we'll see what the Lord has in terms of where that is.
Want to strangle anybody? I'm Daniel Song. I mostly grew up in San Diego, and I went to college at Princeton, and then I was Wayne's intern 13, 14 before I went to medical school at Yale. Then I was here for residency. I did med-peds training, and in that period, I got married to my wife, who's also a physician, and I am currently working back at Lawndale as a physician, both me and my wife, and so we're here for round 2. And the short-term plan is to stay at Lawndale for a while. We're both faculty at the residency program, and that's been an exciting journey. So we'll see where that goes.
Woo, residents. Represent. So, wait, did we get it? So, has anybody ever heard of Wendell Berry in here? If you've heard me speak, you heard me talk about him. I get obsessed with people for a while and then move on. And so, at that Global Health Missions Conference, I heard this British doctor do the same thing I'm doing with a room full of people. And only a few raised their hands. And then he shamed everyone because he said, you're in Kentucky, just a few miles from where this amazing writer, one of the best writers in the United States lives. And I never heard of him. And even though I grew up right down the river from Cincinnati, I went home and Googled him and found out he's from about 25 miles away from where I grew up. Barack Obama gave Wendell Berry the National Humanities Medal in 2010. He's not particularly sort of focusing on healthcare, but he does touch on it. And so there's an essay that was helpful to me called Health is Membership. You can Google it and find it if you want. But I had, at another CCHF conference in Nashville, I was out late one night and Bruce Miller yells across this place where we were outside having, just hanging out, hey, there's some Wendell Berry people over here. And so I went over there and they said, I said, you like Wendell Berry? And they said, he wrote us a poem for our wedding. I'm like, come on. And so she said, yeah. And did you know if you write to him, he's a Luddite, so you can't email him. But if you write to him, you can sometimes go to his house and sit there and talk to him on his porch. So fast forward a few years, Daniel comes here and Daniel drinks the Wendell Berry Kool-Aid. And just as he's getting ready to leave and go to Yale Medicals, he said, you think we should write to him? I said, dude, it's May and you're leaving. And he said, so he wrote him a letter. And about a week later, we got a letter back from him. And he said, I'm pretty booked out, right? If you Google this, people book out for like a year for this time on the porch. But he said, you can write to my wife and if there's a time. And so then Daniel writes back. And the only time we had was Father's Day weekend. It was like 3 weeks away. And I say, Daniel, he books a year out. And so he's like, I'm just going to write him. So he wrote him back and they said, we'll see you on Father's Day. So in 2014, this guy, another intern Christian, and my son sat about 30 miles down the river for 3 hours on Wendell Berry's porch, and we drank from a fire hose. I mean, it was crazy, right? We covered Latin poets, and we covered the Amish, and we covered all things. But as we got in the car and we drove back home, we said, first of all, we tried to write down everything we could remember that the man said. But then I asked the question of everybody in the car, do you have any, what was one of the main things that really struck you? And we all kind of came, and I thought it would be different for each of us because we covered every topic under the sun. But for all of us, it was the same thing. And it was this. He said, I think it would be good if people could be content with the knowledge that they can do a little good. He said, I get leery for people who want to change the world. They come up with schemes to try and do all these incredible things, and it almost always peters out, is what he said. But he said, if people, meaning the church, would be content with the knowledge that they can do a little good where they are, whether you're in medical school or an internship or undergraduate, or you're just starting out, and do a little good and be faithful in that work. If enough people started to do a little good, guess what? It would look like a lot of good. In some ways, the internship program is doing a little good. We call it a program, but we actually don't have any actual program. It's just come and work with us and come walk alongside of us. So my advice to people who are considering doing this is I think it's the best investment you can make, for sure. But don't take it from me. I'm going to ask Daniel. I'll start with Daniel. We'll go down and we don't have to tell you, everybody doesn't have to say the same thing, but maybe we'll start with Daniel because he's the only one who's completely out, and talk about how you got there, and then a little bit about how it was helpful for you, or if it was. And you can tell that because we're Christians, right? So we have to, if it wasn't helpful, you could say that too.
It's a long story, so I'll probably, edit out a couple things, but I guess I'll tell the story of where I was when I first heard about the opportunity at Lawndale. So I was a senior at Princeton, and I come into college. Initially, yeah, I think my parents, I really thank them for the inheritance of faith that they gave me, and I knew that I wanted to be a doctor, and I had this idea that I was going to go abroad to do medical missions, and that's kind of how I came into Princeton, thinking what I was going to do with my future. But things change, right? You're in an environment like Princeton where so many accomplished people are around you who value a set of things that the world values, and you tell yourself that you're immune to those things, but ultimately you're not. You soak up all of those things around you. And the way that my studies panned out, I did a lot of work in global health and health policy, and that dream of doing medical missions had morphed into, I want to be kind of in this space of global health. Senior year, a few faculty members actually told me to apply for the Rhodes Scholarship, and November, I think, of that year, I found myself as a finalist for the New York region, which is crazy. And what they do is they just invite you for a weekend. You have this huge cocktail party the night before. Then on Sunday, everyone takes a turn going into a room full of previous Rhodes Scholars, and they ask you a series of questions for 45 minutes. And then at the end of the day, after everybody's interviewed, they tell who's won that scholarship from the region. So I was doing this interview. It wasn't going particularly well. But the last question they asked me was, well, if you could, let's say, cut off the last three years of your life in order to win this scholarship, would you do it? And I said yes to that. And I remember that night on the train coming back on the New Jersey Transit from New York City back down to Princeton. What I didn't get upset about was losing the scholarship, but what my answer was to that question, and realizing, oh my gosh, I had come in with this, what I felt like was a calling. I spent the 4 years at Princeton nurturing what I felt like was that calling, but then I had morphed into this thing that I didn't want to become. And I was in that space afterwards for a few months of really discerning who I was becoming, like I said, and what God was calling me to do. I knew I wanted to go to medical school. I thought that I was going to take a gap year, but maybe that looked like taking a year or two to do scholarly work, or maybe even doing a consulting job. So I had all these applications out, even besides the Rhodes. And just by chance, our Christian fellowship at Princeton had this event where they had alumni come back and talk about the jobs they were doing. And one of the alumni that came back was a guy named Greg Lee, who is now and has been for, I think, 20 years now, a theology professor at Wheaton College. And so he actually at the time was and still is, living in Lawndale because his wife worked for the legal center and was friends with Wayne. And we had a speed dating event where we'd go around in circles and meet all the alumni and just talk for 5 minutes. And I told Greg my story, how I was looking for things to do in my year off. I applied to consulting jobs and some scholarships, but I don't know if that's what I want to do. And Greg was like, oh, you should talk to my friend Wayne, because I think he has an internship program. And that's how the seed got planted. And then I learned about the story of Lawndale, and I just knew you don't get these often, but sometimes you do, right? You start finding out about something, you just start to hear that might be the voice of God. And I can't think of another time more clearly in my life where I felt like God was leading me to this place, where I found out about this really crazy story of a group of kids and their coach who started a church, who wanted to really love God and love neighbor. And the health center was born out of that. And all these physicians who were living in the neighborhood. And it was so radically different from anything that I encountered in the world of global health, right? Which, if you know, it's a bunch of folks who think that they can solve the world's problems. They go to a place, they try to do that thing, and usually they leave that place worse than it was before. And so all of my studies have been how all of the, why things had gone wrong. And just to be able when I was reading that story online of what was going on at Lawndale, I just felt like, man, like this feels like something different and I need to check it out for myself. And I really felt like God was calling me to give up everything that I was pursuing at the time in order to be an intern at Lawndale. So I pulled my applications out from everything else, waited until April of senior year, which is not how long you want to wait until you have a job lined up, because Wayne, is not always prompt. And then, but then I heard back that I had gotten the job and I spent a year in Chicago and it changed my life. And just to be brief, because I want to give these guys a chance to speak to you, but I think it really took me away from the world of pretense into a world where real things were happening and where I felt like for the first time I saw the kingdom of God in people's lives and in the community. And I needed that more than, God knows, us interns, we're not doing anything that's adding to the work of the clinic. But I felt like by the end of that year, I had an idea and a vision of what I wanted to do with my life. And what was most important about that was when I went to Yale, I didn't get any encouragement to do the kind of work that I am doing now. So if I didn't have that foundation during the internship year, I would have been totally lost. I would have just gone with whatever I was exposed to. Yale doesn't even have a family medicine department. So that's in brief, I think, how I ended up at Lawndale and why that changed my life.
A little follow-up. Daniel and I became friends, there. And so when he would go off and interview at all these places, he would text me how the interview went. And I remember, and full disclosure, I went to Yale for an undergrad. So I was interested when he went there. How did that go? And he said, I think it went pretty well. Do you remember this? You interviewed it with a cardiologist. You said, I interviewed this cardiologist, and the cardiologist said something like, Daniel, I've been doing this for a minute, and I don't know if I've ever met anybody with a more formed understanding of what they wanted to do in medicine and a more mature kind of whatever, something really positive. And I said, dude, you're in, maybe that's it, right? And he said, I said, well, but where did, what do you think that, what happened? And he said, well, it's all from Lawndale. I said, dude, you've only been here for 4 weeks. 4 weeks. And he said, it's changed my life. That's what he said. Daniel was such a good sort of communicator that he told people back in his fellowship about this at Princeton. And every year for the next 10 years, I had one intern from Princeton. They always weren't the operations intern, but every year it was almost like a rite of passage. Like if you're serious about Jesus and you're serious about justice and you're serious about healthcare, you have to take an internship at Lawndale for a year. And not all of those folks, stayed in this. One, Solali, as she ended up at Los Angeles Christian Health Center from Georgia. Tiffany Huang went to Cornell Medical School. She was at Penn, and they were trying to keep her at Penn. You know where she is now? She's at Esperanza. Yeah. And you know why she is? Because she called Daniel and Flo and said, should I take another step of downward mobility? And she did it. And she texted me about 8 weeks in, and she said, I'm so happy to be at Esperanza. I love it. You see how God works, right? It's amazing. It's amazing. That's a pretty incredible story, Daniel. So I feel sorry for everybody else coming after you because they're in the beginning parts. But those are just as important and just as precious. The one who's the newest in this is going to go next. That's Jonathan. And I think, Jonathan, I don't think you have to feel obligated to tell the same kind of story as Daniel, but you can just talk about so far, right? You're from California. You went to Calvin College. I don't think when you moved into the neighborhood, your family was necessarily like super excited about that. And so maybe you can just talk about what the experience has been so far, and you can talk about the bad as well as the good.
Sure. Before I forget, I would say Dr. Song, he hits it head on. People at Lawndale truly do love God. I think it's very evident. Even I've been at the internship for 3 months now, but I feel like there are many people who would call themselves Christians, say they believe in God, but there aren't many who live like they believe it. And I think if you go to Lawndale, these are providers who have gone to Princeton, have gone to Yale Med School. They could go anywhere, right? But they take that step of downward mobility, and because they want to love God and they want to serve, and they see a need and they want to meet it. And even just people, like I met an MA the other day who oftentimes gives his Saturdays to buy food for the homeless and pass it out on the street. I mean, it's just things like that where you can really see people living their life for God. And I think it's such a special place. And I just wanted to say that beforehand. How I came to Lawndale was actually, I was introduced to Lawndale actually through Dr. D's son, Simon. Amazing guy. He's an inspiration to me. Just super accomplished, but super smart, but also super humble about it. And actually that was a big reason why I wanted to go to Lawndale. I remember this well. It was during a breakfast, and he had already graduated Calvin, and he was visiting Calvin for, I think, a talk. And he said, Jonathan, he reached out and he's like, Jonathan, let's get breakfast together. So I'm like, of course, it's Simon. I'm going to go get breakfast with him. And as we talk, we venture along the path of, oh, like, what's your plan? I'm like, oh, I want to be a doctor. He's like, wait, what are you interested in? I'm like, oh, family medicine. He's like, wait, if only I knew someone who was in family medicine and could help you out, right? So he tells me about Lawndale, and he's like, I'm like, okay, tell me more about it. I don't know anything about it. He's like, loving God, loving people is the motto. And immediately I'm struck because this is something I've been praying for all this time. And he's like, yeah, you should definitely apply. And I still remember, this was 4 years later. So 4 years earlier, I still remember him telling me about how he grew up and his parents being both doctors. Both his parents went to Yale and then went to University of Chicago for med school, right? And I'm just like, wow, they're so smart. They can do anything. I'm like, and I remember one of the runners on the cross country team, which is where I met Simon. They're like, oh, wow, yeah, your parents must be really well off. And he was like, actually, they decided to work in a place that meets the needs of people who don't have a lot of money. So they don't get paid a lot. They chose to take that step of downward mobility. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's really admirable. That is amazing. I look up to your parents. I already am super inspired by your parents, and I don't even know them. So fast forward 4 or 5 years later, and I'm working for Dr. D, and that was a huge reason why I wanted to come to this place, I think. Because I did, at the end of the day, want to work somewhere patient-facing, but just knowing that I already knew I would be able to learn so much from Dr. Detmer, I think, and I already have. And so that was just a huge step for why I wanted to work at Lawndale, I think, and yeah. And as far as he wanted me to talk a little bit about coming from California, yeah, for sure my parents were not super excited about me going to a place where the homicide rate is 3.5 times higher than the city of Chicago, all the city of Chicago. It's like the crime rate is 1.78 times higher. We have like one of the highest opioid death rates in all the city, right? It's not the safest place, let's just say. And I still remember the text my dad sent me the day I started work. He said, oh, I was talking to someone who lives and grew up on the south side of Chicago. And he told me, if you go out at night, like, you just don't be stupid, because if you go out at night by yourself, you're going to get shot. That's what my dad told me the day I started. They texted me that the day I started. And I guess that gives you some context of, I guess, how I grew up and how worried my parents were coming into this place. And Dr. Song mentioned Gregory Lee, right? I think a quote that Dr. D likes to say a lot from Gregory Lee is, a Christian should live in proximity to the poor, because only then that person will discover for themselves the only difference between them and me is the family in which we were born. And this is a guy who went to Princeton, did his PhD at Duke, got a Master's of Divinity in Trinity, right? He's been to all the big places, highly educated, super accomplished. And he recognized the reason I'm able to do this is because of the family in which I was born. I had the resources to do that. And I think there's just so much beauty in living within Lawndale. And Lawndale has the 3 R's. One of the things is relocation, right? And so that's part of it, living in proximity to the suffering, the ministry of being present. And I think there's a lot of value in that, and so much I've learned. And so I'm studying for my MCAT right now. One ways that it's helped me is I'm studying for my MCAT right now, right? I'm working 40 hours a week, and then after I'm studying, I've been clocking around 25 hours, right? So that's 65, almost 70 hours sometimes, of my life where, yeah, I just don't have the most free time. I mean, it can be hard, right? But living in proximity to the poor and living and talking to people and seeing what they've been through, it's given me a newfound perspective of what it means to be grateful. I think because I recognize that studying for the MCAT is hard. Just not having free time is hard, but it's a privilege too to also be able to put in those hours and study and to learn. And I learned at the end of the day, what's hard, studying for the MCAT, it can be hard, but what's truly hard is growing up in a community where they don't provide the resources, and like there are people who I've met who have been so desperate they felt like the only place they could turn to is prostitution to get out of where they're at in life. Or they've witnessed their friend being shot in the street. It's like I feel like that is truly what's hard. And so when I think about needing to study and grind it out, it's like this is hard, but I still feel like this is a privilege. And yeah, I think, I don't know, this is just, yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but this is, yeah, why I feel like Lawndale is such a great place. And it truly is amazing. And there's so much more I can say. Even though I've only been working there for 3 months, there's so much more that I've learned. So please ask me questions. I have so much I could share about this experience. I really, truly love it there.
So what we got is that if you're studying for the MCAT, you should move to the neighborhood because it will put it all in perspective. I probably get 10 applications for every one spot. And so it's hard to figure out. And so in the position that we have isn't particularly patient facing. So a lot of folks rightly want to see if being a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a PA is what I want to do. And so this job isn't that. And I tell them that up front. And for people, we try and hire as many as we can and get them in those positions. Buechner said that Buechner, I think is his name, said that the place to which you are called is the place your heart's deep gladness meets the world's deep need. So we want to match that. And so this internship is hanging out with me. And the most important thing is what? What's the most important job? Do you know? Come on, Karen. Ordering food. If they screw up the food order for the provider meeting, they're fired. All this other stuff is secondary. So again, to use the word program, we have to use air quotes because there's no program. There might be a program at Ethne. So we're going to let Trent talk about a little bit about maybe less about how you got there and more about what the actual program is and then how that has shaped your thinking about your future.
Yeah, sure. I've been sitting here cooking on how I got there. So it's really, really, that was really brief. I would say, what's your name again? Abby. I think how I got to Ethne is really similar to Abby. So I was wondering what faith in medicine would look like. And I met with a mentor named Dr. Chad Thompson. I'm telling him like all these dreams, like what I want to do in medicine to intersect with my faith. And we're talking. And he looks at me, there's moments in your life where like you just remember for the rest of your life. And he looked at me and he said, "That's really great, Trent. What are you doing now?" And specifically with the context of the poor. Like, what are you doing now? And I remember I looked at him and I had no answer. And he's like, this is not one of those things where you just like have all this ideology and then you just go out and do it. Like, it's a heart thing. And if you're not doing it in whatever space that you're in currently, like, I think there's some things to ask the Lord and like work it out. And we had this conversation and I'm really convicted by the passage in Matthew 25 that he shares with me. And at that moment, I read it like I've never read it before. And it just talks about, Jesus says, like, whatever you do for the least of these, you'll do for me. And like I could not get that off me. I'm walking to Baylor with all the just ivory tower. Everyone is, and I'm like, my heart is just like beating. And I'm like, I couldn't get it off me. And so he was so clear. He was so clear that like, I read the scripture over and I just read over, yeah, don't be greedy, And then this time, like, read it new. And so yeah, I ended up in ethne, and I'll give you just a couple things that I've learned, and then I'll talk briefly about how maybe the program's different. Being in proximity to the poor, this is what I've learned. It's more for you than it is for them. In James 2, it says, I'm paraphrasing, that don't you know that I've chosen the poor in the eyes of this world to be rich in faith, rich in the kingdom of heaven. And I came in with so much pride, like I'm going to change Clarkston, me, and having like relationships with people who are genuinely needy, like deep relationships with people who they need God minute by minute, hour by hour. It's more for me than it is for them. Anything that I could do, it's more for me. And you can't help but when you spend time with these people in our area, and you're friends with them and you hear their stories, you can't help but go home and like, you don't have to like know all the theology behind all of it. Like all of our staff at ethne, they know none of the theology. Not that that's a bad thing, but when you have deep relationships with these people, you go home and you're forced to like reconcile this tension between the privilege of being an American and not. So that is the most life-changing thing you could do. It's not the programs, it's not the book studies. All those things are great, but having a friend who's a refugee from Burma is, yeah, I guess I would, in whatever space that you're in, I would just recommend making one friend who's in a place and knowing them and them knowing you. And I'll just the next point I'll say is even this idea of like caring for the poor in my heart can become an idol. It's not only like even I wrestle every day with like even good things can become God things in your life, and like laying your life down for the poor and being in house church and doing all these great things and sharing the gospel in a Muslim context, like all these things are good things, but they can become God things. Some signs of that are like judgment. And you look around and you're like, why is no one else doing this? A good thing has become a God thing. And so every day I wrestle with this in my quiet time with the Lord. I'm like, please, Lord, like detach me from these good things that have become God things in my heart. We have 4 gap year students in between. We're all going to med school next year, and we kind of do a mix of things. We do intake in the clinic, so blood pressure, point of care tests, hemoglobin A1C stuff on some days, and then the next day we'll scribe. So we spend quality time with the physicians in the context with patients. And then the other thing that we do is most of our patients don't speak English. And so if you're like, hey, go get a colonoscopy, and you don't speak English, you don't have a car, you're not getting your colonoscopy, right? And so part of our role too is to coordinate with specialists in Atlanta and then provide transportation services. So I'm on the phone on Wednesdays and Fridays for 8 hours a day, calling specialists, getting appointments, coordinating with Ubers and volunteers within the ethne community to bring patients to appointments. So one thing I really enjoyed is like that variety. I think, when you're doing things that can seem monotonous and robotic, so that's sometimes like picking up a phone, being on hold for 4 hours a day, like it can be monotonous, but like that mix of, being with the doctors and then doing intake and having that patient interaction versus like some other roles, like it's been super refreshing. And then we also have a book study. So every month we read a book, some notable books like When Helping Hurts, Upholding the Vision, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, 3D Gospel. We'll do book studies, and then we'll go to providers' houses through ethne, and then we'll do a book study with them per month. We also have Bible studies with all the gap year interns. We've started a whole clinic Bible study. So I think the programming has been like very thoughtful and relational, which has been amazing. And I'm also in house church with the doctors, and they're like my deep friends. Like Andrew and Esther are like my friends. They're all my friends. And so, the programming is super relational, but still all of that, if you hear me say is like, the programming is great, but the poor of this world will teach you more about Jesus than anything that I've ever done.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And I think you see a theme here, right? And I mean, maybe we're kind of preaching to the choir, but these things can be transformative. One thing I'll just take a second and say is that even though we're talking about internships, it doesn't take a year to figure some of this stuff out. We just hired a fantastic faculty member who trained at all the best places. And when I when I was taking her on the $1.50 tour, I said, well, what was your connection to Lawndale? How'd you hear about it? And she said, when I was a med student at University of Chicago, Dr. John Yuen brought us up here, as he does every year. I said, yeah, I took you on the $1.50 tour. She said, yeah. And I said, what, and did you rotate here? And she said, no. But she said, when I was on that tour, I said, this is where I need to be. And that was like 7 years ago. It's the only time she'd ever been there. So that's another way for us all to think is like, how can we leverage whatever resources we have? I joke about my job as being the tour guide. I do tours all the time. These guys, once they're around enough, then they can give some of the tours, and sometimes I come in and do the closer thing or something. But it's important because the tours aren't about lifting up Lawndale. It's about Jesus, right? It's all the grace of God. And so we have an obligation to show what God has done for us and with us through our brokenness. So I spend a lot of times doing tours because I know even the tours can be life-changing. But thank you, Trent, for sharing that. I don't know what any of these people are going to say, just so you know. Of course, we didn't actually plan anything. But I'm going to tell you something about the next person, Karen. So I have a particular, Bruce Roll, he would hire interns, and he didn't mind like what their plans were. But for whatever reason, in 2006, when I hired the first one, I said, I want to take people who are thinking that they're going to go to med school. If they decide not to go to med school, that's okay. But that's who I want to work with personally, because I'm a doctor. And I feel comfortable talking about that and thinking about that. So I've had a lot of interns over the last many years. Right now I have 3 spots just for the operations intern. So I can hire 3 per year that work sort of directly with me. Never until a year and a half ago did I hire anybody who I knew wasn't trying to go to medical school. And that's Karen Almachi. And so the governor of Texas had decided a few years ago one way to deal with all the Venezuelan migrants coming across the border was to start shipping them to various cities. And so I think we've had now something like 60,000 Venezuelan migrants shipped to Chicago from Texas. And once all of our shelters filled up, the city had no other thing to do but to put them in front of police stations. And so they were sleeping on pieces of cardboard, or some of them had tents in front of police stations. And there's a police station just down the road, and we would go down there and I would see these women who were obviously quite far along in their pregnancies, and it didn't seem right. And so one of the things we like to do, because we recognize we can't solve homelessness in Chicago, but we had resources. Some of it was his wife coming back, Flo Shao coming back, who had a heart for obstetrics. And I said, Flo, instead of starting and sort of doing a regular clinic would you, if there's enough volume, would you be committed to just doing OB? Because there might be a real need. And she said, yes. And so then we talked to the city and we said, we will take any pregnant person who steps off of a bus or an airplane and within 24 hours get them into prenatal care. And so we started Casa Esperanza is what we called it. To date, we've taken care of about 250 women. And now we're kind of the thing, all right? Karen knows this on WhatsApp. Like if you're Venezuelan now in Chicago and you want prenatal care, they say go to Lawndale. But some of that's because of this next woman, because Abby had come, and there's a whole story about how she came back after her summer internship. But she and Lindsay were getting ready to go to Honduras, and we had a real need because I needed somebody who could speak Spanish and who could manage WhatsApp, because that's the only way you can talk to them, and how we set up an Uber Health account. We spent $200,000 Uber Health for these folks. And I got an email that said, hey, I'm a recent graduate of Claremont McKenna, and I see you have an internship program in July, and I'd like to know how I can strengthen my application so that I can apply for this in July. And I looked at that, and I saw that she spoke Spanish, and I raised my hand and said, thank you, Jesus. And for the first time, I hired somebody that was not planning to go to medical school, but planning to go into med admin. So she brings a little bit of a different perspective, and I would like for you to share a little bit of your story.
Before I even go on more, I definitely want to mention the other co-intern who was also working with me on that entire project, Johanna. She did not speak any Spanish, and she was holding down the fort for like a couple weeks before I came on, and she did so much work. And just being able to come into that and having one of my first experiences is just seeing this person who didn't speak Spanish, was just so committed to providing all this care and like helping these women who were just very, very scared in a place that they didn't recognize with a bunch of people who probably didn't want to help them. It was just inspiring to me, and it just made me want to, I knew this is where I needed to be, and I wanted to be able to help in any way I could. And as Dr. D said, I speak Spanish. A big part of me wants to do a lot of work for the marginalized communities, like people, especially Hispanic, because I'm Hispanic. I come from that background. And I guess that's where I kind of want to start off is when growing up, I didn't have a lot. My family, I'm a first generation, so my family doesn't have much. We didn't come with much, but my parents always told me that just work hard and he will provide. Like, keep going and you will find a path. And that's what I did. I kept creating that path for myself and for the people who are going to come after me. I have siblings, a younger sister. They will follow my lead, and I will follow those who are ahead of me as well. And just being able to have those experiences has really helped me in the future. I feel like I've been able to connect with some people, some of the patients I've talked to as part of this project, as well, the OB or the Casa Esperanza project, just being able to be there and listen to them too, and going into shelters with our care manager and just provide that sense of like a presence and be with them and listen and know that we are here to help them and provide that care, and just know that we are looking out for them. And then when I first applied to Lawndale, or was like looking into Lawndale, my parents were also not very excited because I grew up in Chicago. They know the area and they're like, why are you going down there if you know how it is? I'm just like, but this is where I feel like I'm getting called to. This is where I feel like I can make the most impact. And after the tour that I had with, actually it was Abby, Lindsay, and Johanna, the current interns at that time, show me around and just see how much of an impact that Lawndale Christian Health Center has in their community. And I was just like, I want to be a part of that. This is where I feel like I'm being called to, especially since I've been given these gifts. Being able to, I went to a talk a couple like yesterday or 2 days ago, and one of the things they mentioned is we need to see being bilingual as a gift. And that is a gift I want to share and use and be able to help others. So like this gift of being bilingual, this gift of having these experiences where I know where these people are coming from and how they're feeling, I think it's him telling me, this is what I've given you. This is a path that you can take and just do a lot of impact. So being at Lawndale, getting kind of thrown into the deep water in a way, and just doing a lot of the coordination for the OB transportation, transporting migrants into our clinics, being able to help them with their prenatal care and coordinating with some of the providers at the time, some of the care managers. It was a lot that we had to do, but I enjoyed every moment, even the hard parts, because I knew that this is going to help me out too. I feel like as someone who is not pre-med and everyone else, I'm usually around people who are pre-med. I know where my strengths are. I feel like my strengths are like operations or organization, and that's where I want, and like that's the kind of area I want to be in, and like that's the different perspective I have too as well. Yeah. So that's why I like applied to Rush and the health systems management program, more of like the behind the scenes. The internship has really helped me solidify that decision that I made for myself and know where I can make the most impact. It's shown me that I do love doing this work. I do love being in this side of healthcare. I do want to still help out more and like push out more of those initiatives that we have across the country or even in our cities, those initiatives that help out people who don't have the resources, people who are probably reaching out to us and asking us for help, and us being like, we will lend you this hand and we will help you through this dark times. I know right now it can be a very, very difficult time with the whole administration and all that, but that makes me even want to go for more. I want to keep going. I want to do this because we can't let them win. We got to keep going. And I've been in the internship for like about a year and 4 months, I guess now. I've learned so much. I've seen so much. One of my first week there working in Lawndale, when I was doing transportation, we were on the computer messaging the patients. I'm like, your was here. They're coming in 5 minutes. And Johanna and I, we were in a meeting and we get a message, like a voice message through WhatsApp, and it's a patient. And I'm just like, what? I can't listen to it right now. Like I can listen to a couple minutes. And then we do, and she's just speaking in Spanish, and it's a guy, he's speaking in Spanish. It's like very frantic, and he's panicking, and Johanna's like, what is he saying? I'm just like, he's saying his wife is having some type of convulsions. I'm not sure if I don't know if Dr. D knows this story. Actually, he does know this story. She's like, has these convulsions. Nobody's seeing her. Nobody understands me. Nobody's helping me. What do I do? You're the only person I know. Like, I already called 911, but they took me to this hospital. She's just laying there and they're not doing anything. And I'm like, whoa. And he just keeps sending these messages. And I'm just like, this isn't right. And so then that's when we bring in to Dr. D. I'm like, hey, there's this guy who is panicking about his wife, and she's pregnant. She's in a hospital. They don't know. They don't have any translators or anything like that. So we just get into this, like, we need to do something mode. So then we start calling the clinic, and we're just like, hey, you have one of our patients in there, and he's saying that he doesn't have a translator. His wife has been there for more than an hour, and nobody's doing anything. And she just keeps getting these convulsions, and they don't know what to do. And it takes a while, and we finally get through. And then they're like, oh, yes, we do have that patient. We'll see him right now. Just let him know that we'll be there in a second. Right there. And within 10 minutes, he gets a translator. He gets seen. He's able to understand finally what is going on and get that attention. And that was within my first 2 weeks there. And I was just like, this is why I'm here. This is him telling me that. This is God telling me, you are here and you chose right, and you need to keep going down, because these systems need to be more accessible, and like we need these people to make it more accessible, and just so we're able to provide quality care. We're able to provide the care that everyone deserves. And that really just left a big impact on me. And this is why I love what I'm doing, and this is why I know I will love the path that I'm going to in the career. And I hope to keep on creating that impact for others, and just be able to be humble too about it, and know that I will listen, and I will hopefully try to provide the same way that he has been providing for me, for everyone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to be brief, but I went to Wheaton College, and I think through that whole experience just was really convicted about, we talk a lot about like vocation and calling and what does it look like to live out our faith. But I think to put kind of flesh on that, I really needed to be at Lawndale and see what it looks like to, just be a Christian within medicine and have that transform every aspect of the work that you're doing. A couple main takeaways, I would say, just over my gap year, I learned so much about humility, and was humbled by my experience at Lawndale because of what Jonathan was saying. I think the realization that circumstances matter so much, and to whom much is given, much will be required. So there's nothing really that's separating me from like the patient across from me eventually, except circumstances, family that I was born into, where I was born. And I think that really transforms the way that you view your interactions with anyone, especially people within this community. And then I think also along the lines of humility, the fact that we're always only coming alongside what God is already doing. He doesn't need us, but we have the privilege and such a wonderful invitation from Jesus to walk with him in the work that he's already doing. Like, he has always gone ahead of us. And I think that is carried out really beautifully in the Lawndale Christian Health Center community. And kind of on the other side of that, another main takeaway that I had is it's just an incredible experience to be in a place, an organization where truly believe that God can still do the impossible. If there's a need in front of us, to go off what Trent was saying, I think that passage in Matthew 25 that talks about what the needs that we see in front of us, Jesus is saying that's what you're doing for me. Are you providing for the needs of food and water and caring for the sick and just do we see the people who are right in front of us, and are we willing to step in even if it's a great risk to us? And that's something that has been super impactful for me, getting to sit under Dr. Detmer and be his intern, is that this man is like a visionary, and he was willing to push for this prenatal care project for migrants who, this is an extremely high risk population. They have traveled so many miles. Many of them were really far along in their pregnancies. And are we willing to step into the gap because we believe that that's what God's calling us to? And we believe that God will provide if that's something that he is putting on our hearts. So I think that that has totally transformed the way that I view a career in medicine. And yeah, I think what Daniel was saying is very true. To be at an academic institution for med school that's very research heavy, very subspecialty focused, it could be so easy to get sucked into that world of just trying to prove yourself. But when you have been in a space where you've been reminded, like, literally everything that I get to do and all that I am, and the fact that I'm sitting here is purely by the grace of God, I think that that does a lot to keep you grounded and remind you, like, this is what the Lord is calling me to, and I'm going to follow on that track even if it doesn't really make sense to the people around me. So those are a few of my big takeaways, and I would love to talk more to anybody who's interested in hearing stories, because I have so many amazing stories of what God has done during my time at Lawndale.
Thank you. When Bruce Roll and I talk sometimes late at night about our favorite thing about working at Lawndale, I have often said my thing might be working with interns. And so that's the other advice I give is don't force this on anybody. It's not for everybody. I love working with interns. And I think that you'll find people in your organization that do, and you'll find people that for whatever reason, that's not what they need, and it's a seasonal thing. But partly I love it because it helps me stay in the game. It helps me see, it's an easy way for me to see God's working in people's lives. And it's a privilege to work with these young folks. And so I want to thank all of them for being on this panel. Thank you all today.